Thank you for joining us tonight on Try to Find Love That Lasts. We're all looking for love. At my university, we had a priest named Father Gus. Now, Father Gus loved birthday cake, okay? Now, Gus was about 4.5 feet tall. He's about 85 years old. He was as holy as Mother Teresa. Now, one day, he's walking down the street with a bunch of college guys. Walking towards them was a group of beautiful college women. And as they were passing by, the girls noticed Father Gus, and he looked a little sad. And they said, "Father Gus, how are you?" And he said, "Well, today's my birthday." And they said, "Oh, Father Gus," and they suffocated him with hugs and kisses. And he said, "Oh, but nobody made me a birthday cake." And they said, "Oh, Father Gus," and they gave him more hugs and kisses, and then they ran off to go make him a birthday cake. Now, one of the university boys looked at Father Gus and said, "Father Gus, you're terrible. You know today is not your birthday." And he looked at him and he winked and he said, "That's how it's done, boys." And Father Gus had a year-long supply of birthday cakes at the rectory from all the college girls baking them for him. Now, we're made for this love, real love. Now, we don't often get to see it. I got to see it in my grandparents. They had 10 kids. They were married for 67 years, and their names were Joseph and Mary. You couldn't ask for more than that. And the best thing about them is they would flirt with each other constantly. I grew up watching this. One day I walk in the kitchen, and my grandma's cooking something, and my grandpa walks in. He's feeling kind of frisky, and he walks in and whap, and he slaps her in the thigh, and he says, "Hi." He says, "My name is Joe." And she looks at him, and she's like, "Huh, I know." And I'm like, "Oh, they're 100 and they're flirting. I love it." And now, she passed away about 5 years ago. I remember standing at her casket next to my grandpa, and he's real weak. He's got all these knee and hip replacements, and he's trying to lean over the coffin to be close to her. And he leans over, he's kind of shaking, and he leans down, and he gave her one kiss on the nose, and he said, "Bye, babe." And I saw that, I'm like, that's it. That's what I want. I want a love that's stronger than death. I just talked to him last week. He's getting very old, close to 90 years old. And I said, "How was your day today, Grandpa?" And he said, "It's pretty hard." He said, "I dreamed about Grandma last night again. And I woke up and I forgot that she had passed away." And he was walking around the house looking for his wife 5 years after she had passed away. His mind is failing him, but his heart is gold. He's still looking for his bride, although she's in heaven. This is the kind of love that, I don't know about you, but I want. I want a love that's stronger than death. But how do we get there from here, where it seems like more people are having casual sex than are even holding hands? A lot of people give up. They think, "Well, I'm never going to find a love like that." Women give up. "Well, I'm never going to find that. I'm just going to grow old, be alone, live in an apartment with 12 cats and be miserable for the rest of my life." And they give up hope. But this love does exist still. A friend of mine in California, her boyfriend proposed to her, asked her to marry him, and the way he proposed to her was by writing a little book of their love story from the day that they had met. And on the first page, it says Jessica. She turns the page, and it says, "The day I met you, I wanted to die." She's like, "This is morbid." And she turns the page, and it says, "To myself, die to myself, to love a woman more than I love me, to put your needs before those of my own." This is the love, not just that we're created to receive, this is the love that we're created to give. But here's the problem. What's the divorce rate? How about the infidelity rate? How many of these are lasting marriages around us? In America, it's a mess. One boy came to me and he said, "I know what you mean about divorce." He said, "Jason, my dad is on his 9th marriage. 16 years old, has seen his dad get 8 divorces. There's jewelry stores in Los Angeles where you can now rent wedding rings." That's how bad it's gotten. And the young people today are looking for love, but they're not finding it. There were some surveys done in America amongst university students. There's what's called the hookup culture, where they're having casual sex, and they asked the students, "How's it going for you? Are you happy?" Here's what the college students said. They said, for one, they were twice as likely to have a hookup as to have a first date with someone. Did they like the arrangement? They said no. They said if you're doing sexual things with someone you're not dating, they found only 9% of the time does it ever evolve into a real relationship. And they asked them, well, are you happy with it? The majority of college students in America, guys as well as girls, said we would much rather be in a traditional romantic relationship than one of these things. And the more of these relationships they're having, the more depressed they were getting. And they asked the women, what are your experiences? And this is what the women said. They said, it's rare for a woman of our generation to meet a man who treats her like a priority instead of just an option. There's no dating anymore. There's no relationships. They're rare. You could have a fling that could last 7 or 8 months and never actually call him your boyfriend. Hooking up is a lot easier. No one gets hurt, well, not on the surface. It's a contest to see who care less. And guys win a lot at caring less. But if you say any of this out loud, it's like you're weak, you're not independent. You miss the whole memo about feminism. And what we're finding is they're just not happy. And here's my question, like, has it always been this complicated? Has it always been this difficult just to find love? It has not. And I've got the proof right here on the rainbow stationery of an 85-year-old woman's letter that she wrote to me. She told me what it was like to date in the 1940s. Ready for this? In the 1940s, I was in college, and every Saturday night, me and the girls would go out. And every Saturday night, we had a 10:30 curfew, and we would go on dances with the Navy and Marine soldiers. In those days, chastity was a given. It was taken for granted. Most of us got many more than 1 or 2 marriage proposals. Going back to when I first started dating in 1940, by 1945, my own count was a 10. 10 marriage proposals in a span of 5 years. I mean, women, isn't that what it's like at your universities? Aren't guys like throwing engagement rings at you while you're just trying to get to class? Now, after graduation, we all got married. All of our marriages have lasted throughout the lifetime. My friend just had her 60th wedding anniversary, and she said after her 50th wedding anniversary, her husband, Mike, was stricken with Alzheimer's disease. And after years of taking care of him at home, on February 13th, 2002, Mike passed away peacefully in my arms. Now, do you women hear this? This woman has a date every weekend with a man in uniform. Where chastity is taken for granted, she gets a marriage proposal every 6 months for half of a decade, marries this man for more than 50 years, and then on the eve of Valentine's Day, he passes away peacefully in her arms. Now, what planet is she from? Like, how do we get back to this type of a relationship? You know, how did we get here in a span of 70 years or so? But more importantly, how do we get back? And I think the key is what she said. Chastity was a given. It was taken for granted. Now, people today don't know what chastity means. My wife and I, we were engaged. We got a phone call from the BBC in England. They wanted to do a documentary on our engagement because they heard that we were not living together or sleeping together. So apparently, news traveled to England that there's an American couple not cohabiting, so send out the cameras. So they interviewed us for hours, going on dates together. They filmed me surfing with my groomsmen and my wife trying on her wedding dress. And they asked us all these questions, like, why are you not having sex? Like, we don't understand. And when they went back to England, they mailed us the video to watch that had aired for all of the United Kingdom to see. And the video was called Anna in Wonderland. And it's about the woman who interviewed us, whose name was Anna, who visits different bizarre cultures around the world. And then she reports on their strange behavior. As the credits were rolling, it said, join us next week when Anna visits a colony of vampires. So this week was my wife and I, next week it's the vampires. And then the credits are rolling, and I found out that she's actually done TV shows on female professional wrestlers, psychics, prostitutes, and people who believe they have animals living inside of them. And now, of course, my wife and I. But this is a fair assessment of how bizarre the world thinks chastity is. But if that's not what chastity is, some blind, neurotic, repressive attitude towards sex, well, what is chastity? Chastity is a virtue, like courage or honesty, that applies to your sexuality. The virtue of chastity frees you from the selfish attitude of using someone else, and therefore it frees you to authentically love. Because think about it. If I can't say no to my sexual desires, what does my yes worth? What is it worth? Nothing if I can't say no. If a man gets married and he has no control over his sexual desires, he will not make love to his wife. He will use his wife's body as an outlet for his lust. So the chastity frees you to love, but it also frees you to know if you're really being loved. I mean, perfect example, I was speaking at a public high school in Texas, in America, and a girl came up to me. She's dating this controlling, abusive older guy, and he treats her terribly. I said, sweetheart, you deserve a lot better. Break up with him. She said, I can't break up with him. I've given him everything, my virginity, my friends, my reputation. I said, look, I understand. Look, just tell him no more sex and watch what happens. She says, okay. And she took her necklace off and she gave it to me. She said, he makes me wear this. He's so possessive. I said, okay, I'll throw it away for you. And she left. 5 minutes later, she came back. She said, I dumped him. I said, that was quick. She said, yeah, I told him no more sex. He slammed his locker shut. He threw a book at me. He said, where's your necklace? She said, I gave it to the chastity guy. And you see what happened is she tested his love. Do you love me? Do you want me? Or do you only want the pleasure that you're getting from me? And you see that this virtue of chastity freed this girl to know if she's being loved or just being used. I know one girl came back from a date with this guy and she was crying. And her mom said, what happened? And she said, I went on my first date with this guy, and as soon as we get in the car, he makes these little perverted sexual jokes of what he wants to do with me. And I told him, no, I practice chastity. And he said, okay, well, there's lots of other stuff we can do, meaning everything but intercourse. She said, I don't think you understand. I respect my body, my future husband, and God. And he looked at her, and he said, so you mean I'm not going to get anything tonight? She said, no, you're not. He said, okay. He turned the car around, drove her home, dumped her off, and he left. And she's never seen him again. And thank God, because she could have given it to him for 6 months, wondering, does he love me? Is he in this for the right reasons? She didn't play that game. She kept her standards high as heaven. And so the chastity will test our intentions. Now listen to what C.S. Lewis said. He said, we use a most unfortunate idiom when we say of a lustful man prowling the streets that he wants a woman. Strictly speaking, a woman is just what he does not want. He wants a pleasure for which a woman happens to be the necessary piece of apparatus. How much he cares about the woman can be gauged by his attitude to her 5 minutes after fruition. For one does not keep the carton after one has smoked the cigarettes. Now, eros makes a man really want, not a woman, but one particular woman. In some mysterious but indisputable way, the lover desires the beloved herself, not the pleasure that she can give. And this is the great value of chastity. One husband said this, authentic sexual attraction is always the attraction to the beauty of the other as a person, not simply an object of selfish consumption. This is the enormous value of the virtue of chastity. Because women, think about it. What you win a man with is what you keep him with. If you win him with pleasure, here's the problem. He can get pleasure somewhere else. He can get pleasure from the internet, pleasure from himself, pleasure from another woman. Pleasure is repeatable. If you win him with your body, everybody's got a body. He can find another one elsewhere. But if you win him with who you are as a human person, the human person is unrepeatable. And it works. In America, this magazine came out called The Economist. It's a business magazine. I don't normally read these things. But it says on the cover, the science of sexual abstinence. So I said, okay, we'll see what they have to say. Headlines. Chastity before marriage may have its uses after all. Hey, who knew? And here's what they found. They studied more than 2,000 married couples, and they asked them, when did you start having sex in your relationship, and how is your relationship going? And here's what they found out. The couples who waited the longest to begin having sex in their relationship, particularly those who waited until they were married, ended up in marriage having better communication. They were more satisfied with the relationship. It was a stronger relationship, and they had greater sexual quality in the relationship. And so it works. And this isn't the Catholic Church saying this. These are secular business journals. And so how do you implement this on a day-to-day basis? Well, I think all too often you're just told everything you're not supposed to do. Well, don't do this and don't do that. How about we spend some time today looking at what you're actually supposed to do to find a love that lasts? First and foremost, I would say, if you really want to find love, the first thing to do is enjoy the season of singleness in your life. Now, some people are like, look, I've enjoyed this season quite long enough. Thank you very much. It's like telling someone who lives in Antarctica, enjoy the season of winter, okay? Like it's run its course, all right? I understand. But what is the point of enjoying a season of singleness? Well, for one, the inclination when you meet someone you're attracted to is to jump right into romance. But there's tremendous wisdom in kind of holding back a little bit. Unfortunately, the culture tells us, well, no, you just jump right in. But it doesn't help things. Now, why? Why should we do this? Well, you get a lot of benefits by stepping back and focusing on the friendship. The culture does not teach us how to do this. I asked a bunch of university students, when was the last movie you saw that portrayed masculine friendship? You know, a man can enjoy the company of a woman without it turning sexual. When was the last movie you saw that portrayed masculine friendship? 400 college students couldn't think of a single movie. One of them raised his hand. He said, I know. I said, what's that? He said, Finding Nemo. I said, okay, well, you got me. Okay, but they're fish. It doesn't count. But not to mention a cartoon. But the relationships are getting too intense too fast. I've had girls tell me, Jason, I can't break up with him. He told me if I ever broke up with him, he would die without me. Sweetheart, if he can't live without you, he doesn't need a girlfriend, he needs a therapist, okay? Like this is not a healthy relationship, this is a hostage situation, okay? This is not how it's supposed to evolve. But instead of just jumping into the romance and getting overcommitted, just step back. And during this time of friendship, of pure friendship, you women can get some serious answers to some serious questions. Who is this guy? No, really, who is this guy? How does he treat women he's not attracted to? What do his ex-girlfriends think about him? Why did those relationships end in the first place? Is he able to maintain a friendship with a girl if it's not headed towards marriage? What kind of guys does he hang out with? That'll tell you almost anything you need to know about a man because we always become like our friends. Ask yourself questions like, does this guy share your morality or does he just tolerate your morality? Well, if you want to save it for marriage, I guess I'm willing. Does he put up with your morality? Or does he have his own morality of his own? And guys can get good answers too. Who's this girl? Why am I so attracted to her? Is it really because she's just so pretty? Well, hey, what if every woman on earth looked exactly like she does? What is it about her that would draw you to her? Are you truly attracted to who she is as a human person? Do you admire her? Does she bring out the best in you? You get answers to these serious questions. Because the purpose of dating is to find a spouse. Meaning, if this person, you cannot see them raising your children and spending the rest of your life together, there's no point in dating to begin with. And girls, I beg you, don't get into missionary dating. Missionary dating. Dating a guy hoping you can fix him and convert him and change him and fix him up like a dilapidated house. You know, we can put some curtains in there. Oh, really? We can fix that thing up. No. You'll end up dating your own imagination. But girls, your strength, like ours, is often our greatest weaknesses. One of your great strengths is you can see the potential in others. But this gets you into trouble with relationships. Because your girlfriends and your family will say, look, this is not the right guy for you. And she'll make all these excuses. Look, I know he's got problems. I know he's got bad friends. I know he's a convicted felon. But I can fix him and I can change him. No, you don't want to date someone hoping they can change. You want to date someone hoping they're going to stay the way they are for the rest of their life. Otherwise, you're not dating a person, you're dating a project. And so you want to begin by focusing on that season of singleness. Point number 2, I would say, if you really want to find love, the place to look isn't out there. The first place we need to look is in here. It's not about finding a perfect person. It's about growing in perfection ourselves to be the spouse that the other person deserves for us to be. The temptation is always look out there. Is she the one? Is he the one? Maybe that's the one. Oh, she's sitting next to me in mass. I can't wait for the sign of peace. Hey, we all been there, and you don't need to stop doing that. Your heart's going to do what it's going to do, but just to be like, okay, wait a minute. First, instead of looking out there, maybe I got to look in here a little bit. When you read the Song of Songs in the Old Testament, it's erotic love poetry, and it's beautiful. And there's these lines in there: "You've ravished my heart, my sister, my bride." Now, some of it you couldn't say to a girl today. You know, your hair is like a flock of goats. You know, that's not how your teeth are like sheep. But some of it is gold. And one of the verses, it says, "Let us catch the foxes, the little foxes that will spoil the vineyard," because our vineyard is in bloom. Now, what they're saying is, let's catch these little things that are going to get in and destroy our relationship. So what is it that's destroying modern relationships? Well, it could be anything from anger to alcohol to infidelity, but one of the biggest foxes that's getting in and ruining relationships is the problem of pornography. And it's not just a guy problem. There's this myth, oh, well, porn, that's a guy issue. Girls would never struggle with that. No, girls struggle with modesty and emotional issues, but never porn. That's not fair. I know a girl who struggled with porn for years, and she said, you know what? She said, when you're a guy who struggles with porn, they all know they're into it. It's like they're all in this big prison together. Oh, we're all stuck in porn. One day we'll get out of here. But she says, when you're the girl who struggles with porn, yeah, it feels like you're in prison, but you feel like you're in your own cell, and you think you're the only woman in that entire building. The reality is, lust is not a guy problem. It's a human problem. But we all need to break free from this stuff. I struggled with pornography growing up. We always had it. Your buddies had it. Your friends had it. In my high school, one guy passed out pornography from his locker to anyone who would vote for him as senior class vice president. I mean, he's in the hallway, vote for Travis, vote for Travis. I don't know where he is today. He's probably in Congress by now. But, we would, we'd laugh it off. Oh, it's not a big deal. Nobody's getting hurt. But we didn't understand what we were doing to our own brains. Because, in one afternoon of looking at porn, a guy can see more perfect women's bodies than any man in history could have ever seen in hundreds of lifetimes. And you get it in one afternoon? Oh boy, you're back the next day, back the next week. You do it for a couple of years, and then you jump into marriage thinking you're going to be captivated by one until death do you part. But what ends up happening is you kill your capacity to be captivated by a single woman, because the most gorgeous supermodels on earth are making you bored in less than a minute and a half. And what you bring into marriage is cancer to that marriage. I knew of some guys that were talking to a classroom of teenage girls. And the teacher wanted these boys to talk about how they were practicing their faith in college to get the girls ready for college. One of the guys admitted during the talk that he looks at pornography and he doesn't see that as a problem. The teacher said in front of the class of 30 girls, "Don't you think that could be a problem in your marriage one day?" And the guy was perplexed. He said, "Why would that be a problem in marriage?" He said, "Isn't that what a wife is for?" Oh, no, that is actually not what a wife is for. Marriage is not the fulfillment of porn. Porn is the distortion of human love. And we have to ask ourselves, what am I training myself for? It's like when I was in college, I played 3 years of baseball for our university. And one day, I'm in the outfield, and the coach yells at me. He's like, "Everett, come in." And I ran to the dugout. I'm like, "What's going on, coach? Are you pulling me out of the game?" He said, "No, I want you to pitch." I'm like, "I don't pitch." He said, "No, I saw you in batting practice. You got an arm. I want you to pitch." I said, "Coach, I didn't pitch high school ball. I don't know how to pitch." He said, "You're going to do great out there." I said, "I'm going to look like an idiot." And so I get out there. I'm like, "Dude, what am I going to do? I don't know what I'm doing." And everybody's ready. The batter digs in. The catcher squats down. And he starts giving me these signs. In baseball, the catcher will give you a secret sign suggesting the right pitch to throw. And if you like that pitch, yeah, that's a good one, you nod your head and you throw it. If you want to throw a different kind of pitch, you shake your head and he'll suggest a different one. You want a curveball, knuckleball, forkball. Now my problem is I really don't have a fastball. Okay, I don't have a curveball, I don't have a knuckleball, I don't have a fork. I have a baseball. That's what I have. And so I'm like, what am I going to do? And the catcher squats down, and I said, "You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play mental games with the batter." And so the catcher squats down. He's like, "1." I'm like, "No." He says, "Number 2." I'm like, "Not number 2. 3, no. 4, no. 5, no." And then he starts laughing because he's running out of fingers at this point. He gets number 7. I'm like, "Oh yeah, number 7, whatever that is." And the batter's like, how many pitches does this guy have? I threw the first pitch, I hit the guy on the first pitch. I hit the batter, right? It's how it goes. But the moral of the story being that if you train yourself for years, lust, and then the day comes to actually love a woman, it's like you can't fake it. All you know how to do is take your own pleasure. But if we can kill these vices, we can be free to love. And the solution is not just to kill your sexual desire, like that's healthy, like that's possible, like that's realistic. The solution is actually to heal our sexual desires so we can be free to love. Because think about it. When we're growing in purity, the inclinations, well, don't look at that girl. Don't look at that girl, or at that girl, or at this girl. Just bounce your eyes. Bounce your eyes. You're going to get whiplash after a while of doing this, because the solution is not to spend the rest of your life avoiding the sight of attractive people. The solution is actually to learn how to look at the human body. Like today, guys, are we surrounded right now by like 1,000 temptations to hell? Or are we surrounded by thousands of reminders of the beauty of heaven? Who's the woman? Just a temptation to hell? We've got to heal the way we look. Pope John Paul II said that when we grow in purity, he said, we come to an ever greater awareness of the gratuitous beauty of the human body, and the beauty of masculinity and femininity becomes a light to our actions. Meaning, did you get this? He says, when you grow in purity, you're more aware of the gratuitous beauty of the body, and that awareness of beauty becomes a light to your actions. Meaning, when you see a beautiful woman, what's your inclination? Is it just to use? Here's an idea. When you see a woman, and maybe you're tempted to lust, instead of just looking away and instead of just lusting, how about this? How about gratitude? How about being grateful to God for the beauty that he gave to her? You could look at her and you could pray Psalm 84. How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord mighty God. And you can move on. Don't recite all of Psalm 84 while looking at her. It could get a little bit awkward, but just what about just gratitude? Because the woman's body from the Garden of Eden has been an invitation of love. When Adam saw Eve's body, he was in awe. He was beside himself. He rejoices, this one at last is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bones. And he's rejoicing. It's kind of funny when Eve first sees Adam, she doesn't say anything. It's like, that's nice. It's like, come on, man. But the woman is presented in Genesis as like this crescendo of creation. And the woman's body is an invitation of love. But because of original sin, we've got this kind of twisted, and we see it as an invitation to lust. But God wants to go in and heal those distortions. Now, if the guy maybe struggles with pornography, and sometimes the girls, I think one way the girls often struggle also is with modesty. And women, the first thing they say is, well, look, if a guy has a bad imagination, that is his problem. I should not have to change the way I dress because some guy can't control his own thoughts. Well, here's a way to address this. A friend of mine works at a college campus, and she said one day, this guy came to her, and he said to her, Sarah, here's my situation. He said, there's a girl on our college who's absolutely beautiful. I'm in love with her. She's a fantastic person. But he said, here's the problem. He said, she wears these outfits that are pretty racy, a little, tight here and low cut there and see through that. And he says, look, I respect her, but he said, the problem is nobody else really does. You should hear the things they say about her when she's not around. And I try to stick up for her, but I just wish she would dress more modestly so guys would see that her body is not the best thing about her. And my friend said to him, why don't you talk to her about modesty? And he said, no, I'm not going to talk to her about modesty. And my friend said, I think you really should. He said, you know what? I'd rather eat my arm off than talk to this girl about modesty. And she challenged him. She said, if you don't talk to her about it, who is going to? And so he said, okay, I'll try. And he talked to this girl about modesty. And my friend saw him. She said, oh, how did the conversation go? And he said, terrible. She said, what happened? And he said, well, I told her, what you suggested I say. And all she said back is, if you guys can't control your imagination, then that's your own problem. And he felt really bad. Less than 1 week later, a woman came up to my friend, totally different girl, and she said, Sarah, here's my situation. She said, there's this guy on campus that I really like, and he's always flirting with me, but she said, when we go out with his friends, he acts like I'm invisible, like I'm not even there. I just disappear. But then when we get back to the dorms, he's texting me, he's flirting me, and I'm so confused. He's sending all these mixed messages, and I don't know if we're dating or even not. And Sarah said, well, you should talk to him about your feelings. And she said, no, I don't want to be that girl that defines the relationship. And Sarah said, how long has this been going on? The girl said, like 6 months. Seriously, that's a long time to wait around for an indecisive guy. She said, you should talk to him about what you're feeling. She said, okay, I did. A week later, Sarah said, oh, how did the conversation go? She said it was a disaster. He said, well, why? She said, I told him what I was feeling, and all he said to me is, we're just friends. If you can't control your emotions, then that's your own problem. And you see what's going on here? A man with no sense of responsibility for a woman's heart. A woman with no responsibility of that sense for the man's heart. But do we actually care for each other's hearts and souls? If so, modesty as a woman is an expression of love for the guys that you don't even know. It's essentially telling these men that the greatest thing about you is not your body. I'm not just challenging you to avoid the most immodest outfits, but to become radiantly pure to inspire men to become worthy of you. So what we've got to do is we've got not to just look out there for love. We've got to look in here. Is there stuff that I should probably work on in my own life to heal, to fix, or to change so that I can be a better spouse? Third thing I would say to find real love, you have to face your fears for men and women. So what are the fears of a man? What are the fears of a woman? What's a man afraid of? Ask him. He'd be like, I ain't afraid of nothing. I ain't no nothing. No, I'm afraid of nothing. Oh, you got fears. What's a man's fear? Often men are afraid of initiating love because we might get rejected. We're afraid of committing and giving of ourselves because the world has told us, well, you don't want to date because then you're tied down. You don't want to get married because the game is over. You don't want to have kids because you're going to lose your freedom. You don't want to lose your freedom. This idea is all over the place. Listen to this. There's an article on the internet on MSN.com. No kidding. This article is called 10 Reasons You Should Never Have Children. Now, you know you've written a dumb article when if the world agreed with you, humanity would cease to exist, okay? So that's a good indicator. The editor should have caught that. But get this. These are reasons you should never have kids. They said if you have kids, the fact is a large part of your life will be focused on your relationship with your child rather than yourself. Ugh. And then it goes on. If you don't have kids, you will not be exposed to germs that they bring home from daycare. It's true, it says microbes are easily transmitted and can be found on toys and blankets and lockers. And it says if you have these germs, the children can end up giving you aches, pains, flu-like symptoms, and diarrhea. That's right, it says it right here. This is true. Like my kids bring home Ebola in their lunch boxes, but it's fine. It builds your immune system. And it says, if you do not have kids, you will spare yourself from back pain, from lifting and carrying babies. It says, lifting a baby out of a car seat and into a supermarket cart can tax your core muscles and lead to back pain and injuries over time. And so apparently if you never have kids, you'll never lift anything more than 12 pounds. And it goes on. It says, if you don't have kids, you can be alone any time that you want. If you don't have time to yourself, you'll lose yourself. Not having kids mean you won't lose yourself. You can play tennis, do yoga, or whatever you want all the time. Now, if this weren't so depressing, it'd be hilarious. This concept that if I give myself, I will lose myself. The church teaches us the opposite, that only in giving yourself will you actually find yourself. We're created to make a gift of ourselves. But especially as guys, we've been sold this false idea of freedom. Pope John Paul II called us on it. He spoke to college boys and he said this. He said, we men are quite willing to take and conquer in terms of profit, enjoyment, gain, and success. And the moment comes to give of ourselves and we hold back because we are not prepared to give. And a lot of men live in this fear of giving of themselves. They're afraid of becoming fathers. I'm afraid I got that girl pregnant. I asked a bunch of high school boys, what's the most common sexually transmitted disease? One guy raised his hand, he said, I know, pregnancy. I'm like, no, kids aren't bacteria. We're not supposed to live in fear of our own fatherhood. John Paul II to college boys also said this. He said, God, who is Father, who is Creator, has planted a reflection of his creative strength and power within man. We men should sing hymns of praise to God the Father for this reflection of himself, not only in our souls, but also in our bodies. God has stamped into the man's body his calling. Look at a man's body. You are the initiator of life-giving love. It's stamped into your anatomy, your calling to initiate the gift of life and love. Original sin twists this in us. So instead of initiating love, we're initiating nothing, or we're initiating lust. But it's stamped into us. We should initiate love. In fact, the best homily I ever heard at my university, the priest got up in front of a crowd of college students, about this many, and he said, young women, please raise your hand right now if a guy on our campus asked you out on a date this week. Raise your hand if some other guy asked you out on a date this week. Very few girls put their hands up. And the priest spent the rest of the homily drilling into the guys for failing to initiate relationships. You should have seen the girls. They were like, hallelujah, Father. You know, preach on. And you know what? Those girls were in love with Father Ron after that day. But we loved him more because he just called us out. I read another priest, he said this, men should act decisively. Don't be an indecisive wimp hoping for an apparition. Trust in God and pop the question. There's even a beer commercial on TV in America now where there's this man sitting with all these gorgeous women, and he looks at the TV screen, and all he says is it doesn't take two people to talk to one woman. And I'm like, oh, you see what he's saying? Go out, initiate, face that fear of rejection. And so this is part of what it means to be a man. We should initiate love. The problem is nowadays, guys are raised in this culture where they're not told what to do. We're given these general ideas. Well, be a gentleman. Well, that doesn't mean anything to a guy. Men, just so you women know, we need you to be very specific. When you get married, don't be vague and general with your husband. We need very specific information. Like, my wife will say to me, like, honey, I could really use a little more help around the house. That's too vague. I'm like, house big, and she says, take out the trash. I'm like, oh, I can do that. We need specifics. And so with dating, we need specifics that we're supposed to initiate relationships. Very interesting, this article came out in the States. At Boston University, a professor was troubled by the fact that she noticed that on her college, very few college students were going on dates. They might have a beer and hook up, but nobody's going on dates. So she wanted to fix this. So she said, you know what? She said, I will give you, my students, extra credit if you go on a date. And she said, here's what a date is. You have to ask her out in face-to-face. You can't hide behind an app. Ask her out face-to-face. No drinking, no sex, no kissing, and just a simple date. And if you do that, tell me about it, and I will give you extra credit. Now, the students were intrigued by this revolutionary concept, and they said things like this. This one guy, Frank DiMartino, who's 18, said, it's easy to hook up with someone you just met in a dark room after having a few drinks, but asking someone out on a date in broad daylight when you actually have to know their name can be really scary. And he asked the professor, how would you ask someone on a date like the actual words? And you see what's going on. Like, he just wants to know, what am I supposed to do here? Because growing up, the guys aren't told what to do. They're told, be a gentleman. Well, that doesn't mean anything to a teenage boy. Go ask a teenage boy, what's it mean to be a gentleman? They'd be like, well, if there's a door and then there's a girl, you open the door for the girl. Okay, good. What else? He'll be like, well, if there's another door, then that door also, okay, stretch this a little bit. And so I tell him, look, when you go on a date, you got to ask her out and you got to plan the date. Don't sit around, what do you want to do? I don't know, what do you want to do? I don't know, we can play Minecraft. I don't know, what do you want to do? Plan the date and put some thought into this. And when you get to the restaurant, maybe, pick her seat for her. Not because I'll tell you where to sit, but if it's a beautiful view, come on, man, give her the beautiful view. If there's no view, the man takes the seat facing the wall. So she knows during dinner, your attention is on her, not on the soccer game or the cute little hostess walking by, and it makes her feel honored. You tell this to teenage boys, and they're like, oh, that's good, that's good. And they'll say, well, what else? What am I supposed to do? Okay, don't flirt. Don't flirt ever with girls. Because what's a flirt? A flirt is a boy who pays romantic attention to someone without serious intentions. Don't be a flirty boy. Instead, discern if you're supposed to be in the relationship. Then pursue her with sincerity and commit to her with clarity. Now, this is not a robotic formula. Don't go up to a girl, I've discerned, I should pursue you. It's like, okay, Catholic stalker. But clarity, what a concept. To actually define the relationship, to let her know where it's headed. I was speaking at a university, and after the talk I gave like this college boy came up, and he was all excited. He's like, hey. I'm like, what's going on? He said, do you have gum? I said, yes, I have gum. I think you could use a tranquilizer dart, but I'll give you the gun. And I got in my backpack. I gave him a piece of gum. He grabbed it out of my hand. He said, I'm going to go ask her out right now. She just took off. I'm like, go get him. Oh, discern, screw it. Just ask her out. And you see, that's what he wanted. He just wanted someone to set him free. Go initiate that love. Because when a man is passive, he's out of place. Now, please understand, women, I'm not saying that your job is therefore to be passive. Some girls fall into this. Some girls get very aggressive. Some get very passive. But you as a woman, your job isn't to be passive. Some girls do this, and they just sit back, and they're like, oh, well, he'll come to me one day. He'll come to me one day. It's like, dude, Ingrid, you're 97 years old. Oh, he'll come to me one day. Well, maybe if he's a courier, he'll knock at the door. But, other than that, you got to get out, girl. And so the woman's role is not passivity. The woman's role is active receptivity. And what if a guy's fear is, well, I don't want to commit and give and initiate, a lot of times the girl's fear is the opposite. She's not worth committing to. She's not worth pursuing. Why? Because you're just not enough of a woman. And a lot of girls fear this. Well, I'm just going to end up alone if I put my standards too high. If I just lower the bar, I can get more guys into my life. So maybe I should. Maybe I just need to be more realistic. And you start lowering the standards, and then the guys start coming in. And then typically afterwards, you end up kind of disappointed because it's not what you wanted to begin with. And then you start making excuses. Well, look, I know I did this with that guy, but at least I'm not doing this every single weekend. But you'll notice, if you're ever doing something good, you don't make excuses for good behavior. You don't. If you're like feeding the homeless, you don't be like, well, at least I'm not robbing a bank here, Your heart is at peace because you're doing something good. But when our heart is not at peace, it's a sign something is off. And typically, a girl will begin making excuses. Well, at least I'm not as bad as my friends. At least I'm not doing it every weekend. And then she starts giving up on herself and then justifying the pain she's feeling. One girl emailed me, and she said, after these hookups, she said, I feel like the gross stuff in the road after the snow is melted and cars have been driving on it for a while. What was happening is her heart was just getting crushed in these relationships. And enough of that, the woman ends up literally numb, where she'll say, look, I can hook up with boys. I'm not emotionally devastated if they don't text me back. I'm sexually liberated. This woman isn't liberated, she's numb. If you get a first-degree burn, that hurts. It's red. Second-degree burn, you got blisters. Third-degree burn, the skin is black and dead. You could poke it with a needle, you wouldn't feel a thing. The nerve endings are gone. It's the same thing with the human heart. Once we let it get wounded enough by sin, it becomes numb. And these women might have no boundaries with their body, but you'll notice they have a mile-high wall around their heart. And so what do we do if we find ourselves in this situation? Because you'll notice where our fears are colliding, it's where the man's not committing, she's not expecting more, and we settle for just some hookup. But we're made for so much more. So how do you untangle this mess? First thing I would say is go to God and ask him for what you lack. If you lack trust, ask him for trust. If you feel you need healing in your life for some decisions you've made, ask him for that. Be specific. God will answer your prayers. When I was in New Zealand, there were a bunch of nuns there that wanted to do a Christmas play. One of the nuns was very extravagant. She wanted real baby Jesus, real donkey, real hay, real chickens, real everything. And they said to her, sister, it's a great idea, but they said, look, where are we going to get a donkey? I mean, we live in New Zealand. There's no native land mammals here bigger than a bat. Where are we going to find a donkey? And she said, we will do a novena to Saint Joseph because he found a donkey for Jesus and he'll find a donkey for us. Well, that's logical enough, so they did the novena. And the sister said, okay, sisters, get out a piece of paper. And she said, I want you to draw a picture of a donkey on a piece of paper and put that under your pillow. So when you go to bed at night, you'll feel the paper, you'll remember to pray for the donkey. And you'll wake up, you'll feel the paper, you'll pray for the donkey. Okay, so they did this for like 9 days, and then some weird guy shows up at the convent with the donkey. And they're like, oh, praise God. And they looked, the donkey had no tail, nothing at all, just like it had never been there. And they said, we should still be grateful. It's still as much of a donkey as anything else, even though there's no tail. And then the sister went to her room, and she brought out her drawing. And she said, sister, get your drawings. All of the nuns brought all of their different drawings and put them together. And you know, true story, not a single nun remembered to draw the tail upon the donkey. And so, moral of the story is when you ask God for something, it helps to be specific, okay? And so ask specifically, what do you need? Do you need healing as a single person? Please, I beg you, get that healing before you get married as much as you're able to. My wife, she says, you know what, Jason? You want to know a little secret about women? She said, women are masters at stuffing their stuff. She said, Jason, stuff happens to women, like really serious stuff. She said, you know what the girls do? Stuff it. They put their makeup on, their hair looks great, oh, their clothes are all put together. She said, outside, we want to look like we all together. Because she said, inside so often, it's like this tangled up mess. We're so afraid to start crying because then we're afraid we're never going to stop crying. So we just numb ourselves with false consolations, an empty relationship, having another drink, whatever it is, eating disorders, diet pills. She said, all of this is being done to numb the wounds that aren't being healed. She said, I want to show these girls, you can face it, you can own it, and you can heal it. She says, I don't care what's happened to you. It's happened to my wife as well. She's been through all kinds of abuse and difficult situations. And she says, but you know what? You can start over because God can make all things new. But he's got to come first. Because if you enter a relationship looking for the love that only God can give to you, the relationship becomes an idol. But all idols are meant to be broken. And C.S. Lewis even said, all idols will break the hearts of their worshipers. And so what we're doing right now is we're looking deep in the roots. What is stuff going on in my life? Fears that I need to face. Fears of going to counseling. Fears of commitment. Fears of being unlovable. God wants us to not be afraid and to meet him in those fears so he can prepare us for the sacrament. This is authentic marriage preparation. Marriage preparation is not what happens 6 months before your wedding date. If you wait then to prepare for your marriage, that is not marriage prep. That's like triage, okay? That is like last minute effort to heal. We gotta start right now. This is why Pope Francis said marriage preparation begins at birth. Now, point number 4, in the relationship, make commitment clear. I'm finding that a lot of single people behave like they're dating. A lot of dating people behave like they're married. A lot of married people are behaving like they're single, okay? We got to get these things back into the right order here. And so how do you do that? One way is to make commitment clear in the relationship. Ultimately, don't behave like a girlfriend when you're not a girlfriend. When you are a girlfriend, do not behave like you're his wife. We put a meme on our Instagram page, and it said, our boyfriends do not get husband privileges, period. Plain and simple. Don't behave like a spouse when you're not one. Now, one of the challenges with this is a lot of guys don't define the relationship with a girl. And so the girl is wondering, are we dating? Is he my boyfriend? Where are we at with this? Ultimately, guys aren't communicating well in this area. But guys are not great communicators to begin with, okay? Now, that's not our fault, though, okay? That's God's fault, okay? And here's why. Because women, they say, speak 3 times as many words as guys do, starting at the age of 2, okay? You can see this in, like, the playground with little girls. There's Sally said to Jessica, that Jessica, la, la, la. Look at the boys. They have trucks. They're like, boom, boom, boom. It's like... And when you grow up, it's the same. The adult woman speaks 20,000 words a day. The adult male, 7,000, which means most guys, we hit our quota by lunchtime, okay? And then, I get home from Singapore, my wife's like, oh, how was Singapore? I'm like, good. Not much sleep, but good. And then my wife's like, well, let me tell you about my day. She still has like 19,000 words to go. It's a lot to consume. And they found this difference doesn't just start when you're 3 years old. National Geographic did a study of unborn embryos. They found that female unborn embryos, at about 7 to 8 weeks of gestation, the mouth begins to move. The male embryo, nothing is going on there. I'm sure you could look at her little fingers in there. She's probably texting in there, just getting ready to click send, And so the guy is not talking. And so why isn't the guy talking? Well, he's probably not even thinking to begin with. In fact, a psychiatrist explained to me, they did a study that showed that women have a very high level of neurological activity 24 hours a day. Even when she's sleeping, it's. But they said the male brain, on the other hand, will actually go into periods of hibernation. While he's awake, it's just nothing. And you women, you know what I'm talking about. These are the moments you've looked at him and he's just glazed. And you're like, are you there? And you're like, honey, what are you thinking? And he's like, hey, what? Hey, nothing. And she's like, no, you can't be thinking nothing. What are you thinking about? He's like, no, I'm thinking about nothingness right here. And now she's suspicious. Well, what are you not telling me? I'm telling you nothing. What are you feeling right now? I'm kind of hungry, but no, feelings what do you desire? A ham sandwich would be nice, and so he's not talking, he's not feeling, he's not thinking, and the girl's left there thinking, well, man, what do I need to do to get this boy more interested in me? Maybe I need to just give him what he's least likely to reject, namely my sexuality. Because if I give him that, then that's going to keep him. But this typically ends up backfiring, where she's giving him sex or sexual things for the sake of giving her love, and he's just giving her love for the sake of getting these sexual favors. This is not how to build lasting love. We need to define the relationship and live in that state instead of jumping ahead or behind. Point number 5, keep this relationship pure, because there's this temptation in all of us to justify sin. We think, hey, look, I'm 24 years old now. I'm 19. It's not like I'm 12 years old anymore. The older you get, you don't get a permission to sin. The older you get, the closer we should be getting to God. We make justifications. Well, I've never felt this way about a girl before. We've been dating for 2 years now. It's not like I just met her last weekend. We can do these things. And so we make these excuses. But I'll tell you, we start playing God. Well, I know she's the one. Well, I'll tell you, I knew I had met this girl, and I knew she was the one. I knew it. And then, unfortunately, it didn't work out, and she ended up going to a different primary, second grade than I did, when she was like 8 years old, and I never saw her again. So it didn't work out. Then I got to high school, and I met this girl, and I knew we were going to get married. And, we were friends. We went to some dances together, and it didn't work out, and she married a friend of mine. And I'm like, that's okay. And then I got to college, and I met a girl, and I knew she was the one. We dated for 6 months. It didn't work out, and she married a friend of mine, and that's okay. And then I met another girl, and we dated for 2 years, and I knew that this was the one. And we tried on wedding rings. Our parents loved each other, and I ended up breaking up with her, and then she married a friend of mine, and that's okay. And then I met another girl when I was, in my early 20s, and I knew she was the one. We dated for 2 years. It didn't work out, and she married a friend of mine. And then I met my wife when I was 24 years old. And by then, all my friends had married my ex-girlfriends, so she had no choice to stay with me, and then so we got married. But the point being, you could have never have convinced me with any of these other girls that they were not the one, because I thought that the intensity of my emotions was an indication of my destiny with this woman, when in reality, that the intensity of your emotions is not a sign of the future. It's just a sign of how close you feel to this person. But we can't begin to play God. And the day it kind of hit me is one of these girls invited me to one of her wedding. And I was friends with her and the guy. I said, I'd love to go. And I flew to their wedding, and they said at the end of the Mass, we'd like to announce now for the first time, Mr. and Mrs., and everybody clap, and I'm clapping, and here they come walking down the aisle, husband and wife. And then it hit me like, wow, I've done this with that guy's wife. I've been that physically intimate with that man's wife. No, we didn't have sex, but we did other stuff, but I justified it because I knew that we were meant to be. And then it dawned on me that I should not be pretending to be someone else's husband because I think I have this intensity in my emotions, but I should let God bring my bride to me. And so what does this look like on a day-to-day basis in relationships? You should date someone in such a way that if it doesn't work out, that their future spouse could come to you and give you a big hug or a handshake one day and say, thank you for making my husband or wife the person that they are today. Thank you for making them a better person. Instead of they come into your life and then they end up leaving further from God. And this requires a bit of dying on our part. A boy came to me once and he said, look, I'm sleeping with my girlfriend, but he said, I love her. He said, I love her so much, I would die for her. I said, really? He said, I'm serious. He said, if someone were to put a gun to her head, I would tell that person to shoot me instead. I'm like, really? You take a bullet for her? He said, absolutely. I said, okay, if you would die for her, then do it. He said, what do you mean? I said, look, nobody's going to be shooting your girlfriend unless she's involved in organized crime or some drug cartel, in which case you need to make a better dating decision. I said, look, nobody's going to be shooting your girlfriend. You don't have to protect her from the mafia. You have to protect her from sin. You have to protect her from your own lust. That's the death that has to happen. But the thing is, we want to look like a knight, but we don't want to bleed like one. But here in the area of chastity, Christ is inviting us to sacrifice. I think Jesus looks down from the crucifix into the heart of every man. And he says to you, the crucifix, this is how I got my bride to heaven. How else do you think that you're going to get yours there? There's got to be a dying to ourselves. On our wedding day, there's a little boy sitting in the back of the church, and he'd never been to a wedding before. And he kept asking his dad, what does this symbolize? What does that mean? What are they doing? And he said, Daddy, how come Kristalina is wearing this blue, beautiful, white, radiant wedding dress? And he said, oh, Anthony, that's because today is the happiest and most radiant day of her whole life. And the kids, oh, okay, that makes sense. He said, Dad, how come Jason's wearing all black then? Okay, it's a fair question, because black means death. We're invited to die to ourselves. And this idea is starting to take off in Christian circles in America. If you've ever been to a wedding in America, I don't know if they do this here, there's a tradition that after the wedding, the bride sits down and all the wedding party comes around and the groom kneels in front of her. And he reaches up her leg and he grabs a garter, which is a thin fabric around her thigh, and he pulls it down and then he throws it to all the single guys who fight over it like a good luck charm. And a lot of guys are saying, you know what, that's not really reverent. That's not what I want to do at my wedding. So they say, we're going to start doing something differently. So what they do is the bride sits down, all the wedding party comes around, and everyone thinks, here comes the garter. And then the young groom will kneel down in front of his bride, and then he'll pull out a pitcher of water with a bowl and a towel. And he will take her shoe off and he will wash her feet like Christ washed the feet of his apostles, his bride, the church, on the night before he gave his life for her. Now, these young husbands are not putting on a show for their wedding party. They actually believe this is how my bride deserves to be served. And we can do this as single guys, this sacrifice through our own chastity, through our own abstinence. Listen to what one saint said. He said, St. John Chrysostom said, young husbands, you should be able to say this to your wife. You should be able to say, I have taken you in my arms and I love you. I prefer you to my life itself. For the present life is nothing, and my most ardent dream is to spend it with you in such a way that we may be assured of not being separated in the life reserved for us. You see this? He wants to be with her in this life, but real love is you want to be with the woman for all eternity. It's not about following all these rules so you don't go to hell. It's about wanting heaven for the person that you love. And if you learn this as a single guy, that your abstinence is an expression of love, this is going to be one of the greatest gifts you can bring into marriage. And here's why. In marriage, abstinence is going to be a part of your marriage whether you like it or not. It's going to be a part of expressing love. Sometimes it's going to happen in extreme ways. A friend of mine married another friend, And she had been sexually abused when she was a little girl. She had been molested, and she never went to counseling. She just kind of said, I'm strong, I can deal with this. In marriage, the memories started to come back to her. And she told her husband, my friend, she said, honey, I can't be physically close to you right now. It's causing too many bad memories to happen to me. And he said, honey, I understand. I love you, and I can show love to you in non-physical ways. And she said, thank you, honey. I really need that from you right now. And a week went by of abstinence in marriage. Okay, that happens. And a month went by of abstinence in marriage. Okay, that happens. And then 2 months went by, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6 months of abstinence go by in marriage. At which time, the husband is really wrestling with God about this. He's like, Jesus, I didn't sign up for this. And Jesus is like, actually, you did. Good times, bad, sickness, and health. This is what we're talking about. And this man, his masculinity was really tested. Because he said, you know what? I don't feel masculine at all. My wife is completely sexually unresponsive towards me. And I feel like less of a man because of this. And he realized, well, wait a minute. This is a wound in me. I've been kind of raised with this idea that, a real man, women want to be with him sexually. And basically, a real man conquers women for the sake of himself, when in reality, a true man conquers himself for the sake of a woman. And he realized through this abstinence with his wife, he was expressing greater love for her than he could by making love. And he took this cross and he carried it manfully. And what ended up happening, not only did God heal him of the distortions in his own masculinity, but his wife was healed in the process as well. And you can see so clearly in this couple that abstinence is this profound expression of love. And it's not that, well, why do I have to be abstinent now? It's not that, well, when you get married, sex becomes legal and then it's good. It's no. Within marriage, your body is speaking the truth. The total gift of the body should come with the total gift of the person. And as you prepare for the sacrament of marriage, the sixth point I would say, do not live together prior to marriage. And couples will say, well, you got to see if you're compatible with each other. Well, look, compatible comes from Latin, compati, which means to suffer with, okay? Lasting marriages aren't because you fit perfectly, but you're willing to work at your marriage when things get tough. Now you're getting into the sacrament of marriage. How do you practice chastity inside of marriage? One thing I would recommend is if you want to plan how many kids you have, use natural family planning, NFP. Now, unfortunately, people say, well, wait a minute, NFP? Isn't that whole Vatican thing, the rules the celibates have for marriage? Oh, jeez. What could a bunch of celibate men possibly know about sexuality in marriage? This idea that celibates can't know anything about human love is nuts. Just think about it. Look, I'm a married man, okay? Which means I know one woman and that's it. And she'd probably argue, I don't even know her that well. I mean, she even said to me once, she's like, Jason, you're not a very good listener. I said, honey, I'm a motivational speaker, not a motivational listener. Now, she didn't think that was very funny, but I thought it was rather witty on my part. But look, I know one woman imperfectly, but a priest is not confined to one because he's hearing thousands of their confessions. And to think that we have nothing to gain from listening to them, we end up impoverished. Because natural family planning taught me my wife's body's perfect. She doesn't need drugs. She doesn't need pills. She doesn't need condoms. She doesn't need barriers. You know what a woman's body needs? To be understood. Because if you can understand her fertility, then instead of suppressing her fertility with chemicals to conform to my desires, I learned to conform my desires to the way her perfect body has already been created. This is real sexual liberation. You don't have to worry about all the side effects of birth control. There's all kinds of side effects. They even found out that women on birth control pills blink 32% more often than women not on the birth control pill. I mentioned that at a school, and students looked over and like, hey, look, that girl's on the pill. And she's like, no, I'm not. Stop it, guys. Quit looking at me. But we don't need to tinker with our bodies like this. And natural family planning does involve times of abstinence. A friend of mine, he and his wife couldn't have kids, and they went to a fertility doctor. And the doctor said, okay, I need you and your wife to abstain from sex for 30 days so I can chart her fertility with precision. My friend said, we need to be abstinent for a month? The doctor said, yes, 30 days. My friend said, does it need to be 30 consecutive days? The doctor's like, yes, 30 days. The nurse at the hospital, it was a Catholic hospital, was a religious sister, a 70-year-old celibate woman. And when my friend said a month, the nun looked at him and she said, "You'll be all right." And realized, he's gonna be okay, and he got through it and they were able to have kids and everything. But this sacrifice, you can see how learning self-mastery before marriage is gonna be a great asset when we enter into the sacrament of marriage. But ultimately, it's not that good Catholics use NFP and bad Catholics use contraception. No, good Catholics are open to children as the supreme gift of marriage. And if we can't have them right now for a serious reason, then we can fall back on NFP. But the default position to be openness to the gift of life. Now, upon hearing all this stuff today, you might be like, whoa, this is a lot of information. I mean, how do we begin living this out? First thing I would say is you've got to find good friends. You'll become like your friends. Think, who in college was St. Francis Xavier's roommate? St. Ignatius of Loyola. Now that kind of helps, doesn't it? Now, college students might be thinking, well, my roommate's not going to be a canonized saint anytime soon. Well, perhaps. But you want to stay plugged in to the good friends. Stay plugged in with your family and stay connected ultimately to your family, the church, through the sacraments. Go to confession. Some people are like, I don't want to go to confession. What if I tell the priest what I did? It's going to be too awkward. I'll tell you, the best confession I ever had is when I've done the worst stuff. In college, I'd done some dumb stuff, and I went to this priest, and he was visiting from France, and I thought, oh, great, I'm never going to see him again. So it's bad attitude, but where I was at, and I confessed all my sins. And he sits there, and he says to me, Jason, he says, for your penance, I want you to tell Jesus that he has a problem. I said, what? I said, you want me to tell Jesus that he has a problem? And he's like, oui, yes, And I said, I don't understand. And he said, well, look, do you belong to Jesus? I said, yes, I belong to Jesus. And he says, well, Jesus has you. You are a big mess. You are a problem. He has you. Jesus has a problem. And I said, oh, good. But what a beautiful way to look at your sins. Just don't take yourself so seriously. That's why St. Francis de Sales said, have patience with the whole world, but just first of all with yourself. Is confession humiliating? No, it is most certainly not. Sin is humiliating. Confession is humbling, and sometimes we need it. Sometimes it's a little awkward. One day in college, I came back from class, and my roommate is sitting in the house. I'm like, hey, what's going on? You want to go to the gym with me? He said, no, man, I'm watching TV. I'm like, okay, I'll catch you later. I came back, and he's still watching TV. I'm like, hey, you want to go outside and do whatever? And he said, no, I'm watching TV. I'm like, okay, whatever. And I came back later. He's still watching TV. I'm like, dude, Dario, man, you got to get up. You got to go do something. He was Italian. They watched like World Cup for like a week straight without blinking. And I'm like, you got to do something. You're kind of being idle. And he didn't understand English real well. And he was like, idle? Like the television is my idol? And I said, no, idle meaning like you're sitting around too much. And he was kind of convicted of this. And he thought he was guilty of idolatry, okay? And so he goes to confession to a priest who is almost deaf and said, Father, forgive me, I've sinned. I'm guilty of idolatry. Which sounds a lot like another sin, namely adultery, which is what the priest heard. And he said, oh, so Father, forgive me, I'm guilty of adultery. The priest said, oh, that's very serious. And Dario said, well, not really. Oh, well, yes, it is. Well, Father, it's just something to do. Oh, no. And, well, gee, Father, don't get so uptight about this. I mean, some friends even come over sometime. Oh, no. And he said, yeah, my roommate walked in on me, kept telling me I needed to cut it out, so I just came over. Ah! And people outside the confessional are like moving away because the yelling going on inside. Gave him this gigantic penance, for doing, watching TV. He didn't realize the communication discrepancy, But look, it's a little bit awkward sometimes, but that's okay. Maybe we need that humility in our lives. Just go to confession. And tonight, this sacrament is going to be available. There's 20 or so priests that are going to be available later tonight for the sacrament of reconciliation. Don't just go to confession, have a great confession. I don't care if it's been 20, 30 years since you've gone to the sacrament. Start going more often. And also, stay close to Jesus in the Eucharist. We're about to celebrate the holy sacrifice of the Mass. We invite you to please stay for this, because this is where all the graces that we're going to get to live this lifestyle are going to come from the Blessed Sacrament. It's easy to doubt that this, what looks like a piece of bread, is the flesh of God. But someone who really understood Christ's presence in the Eucharist was St. John Paul II. When he came to America once, there's a man, a priest named Father Roberto Tucci, who gets everything ready for the Pope's visits. A couple weeks before the Pope came to Baltimore, Maryland, Father Tucci shows up to get everything ready. He's walking through the bishop's residence, checking everything's ready, and he notices the Pope is going to walk down this hallway with all these doors on either side. One of the doors opens to a chapel with the Blessed Sacrament. So Father Tucci says to the priest there, Father Michael White, Father, when the Holy Father comes, please make sure the door is closed. We can't let John Paul II know that the Blessed Sacrament is here in the residence. And the priest said, well, why are you hiding Jesus from the Pope? That seems kind of counterproductive. And Father Tucci said, look, we are in charge of the Holy Father's schedule during apostolic visits. They said every minute of his day is set aside for something specific. He's got 4 minutes with the prime minister. He's got 8 minutes with the seminarians, 12 minutes for the poor. Everything is scheduled. He said the problem we're having with John Paul II is that whenever he finds the Blessed Sacrament, he wants to make a visit to Jesus. He gets lost in prayer for 45 minutes and it ruins the entire schedule. So he said we actually reroute his Pope mobile away from Catholic churches and then he'll never know. He says, otherwise, they say we drive by a church and he's like banging on the glass of the Pope mobile and he wants to see Jesus. So we just drive him down the block. It doesn't make a difference. And so he said, look, when the Pope comes, just make sure the door is closed. Father Michael White said, okay. 2 weeks later, the Holy Father lands in Baltimore, and he's walking down this hallway, and he's passing by, and Father Michael White there, and Father Tucci's there, and he's passing by all these doors, and he keeps walking, and he passes the door. And then he stops, and he looks over at the door, then he looks over at Father Tucci and shook his head and wagged his finger at him, opened up the door and went right into Jesus. And Father Michael White was standing watching this, astonished. He said there's no way he could have known. He's never been here before. All of the doors look exactly the same, but he sensed our Lord was physically present in the sacrament of the altar. And just to give Father Tucci a little poke in the eye, he spent 45 minutes in adoration. And Father Michael said, if you think that was a little coincidence, he said he did the exact same thing the next day at the seminary. He knew exactly where Jesus was in the building. That the question in Mass is not, is Jesus truly present? The question is, are we truly present in Mass? Not only in body, but also in our soul. So just don't go to Mass, get into Mass. And so to live out this lifestyle ultimately is a gift he can give us. But we have to do our part. And so there are resources we want you to invite you to check out on the way out. All of these different books and things are available to you. And I just want to run through what they've got in the back there. This is a book my wife and I wrote for single women. It's called How to Find Your Soulmate Without Losing Your Soul, 21 Secrets for Women. And some people are like, well, where's the book for guys? Well, guys don't read, okay? So here's the book for the guys right there, okay? So it's about 40 pages, larger print, pictures, bring crayons. So those are for the guys. And then for the women, my wife wrote a book called Pure Womanhood. And then also, there's a book, If You Really Loved Me. It's the top 100 questions we get on dating, relationships, and chastity. And then also a biography of my hero, St. John Paul the Great. And then lastly, there's little postcards. And on these things are our talks that you can listen to. And then all of our websites. My website, chastityproject.com. Women Made New is my wife's website. And so all of these different ways that you can connect to us with social media, Instagram and Facebook, all of those resources are there. But the best gift I have for you is this. As of today, I've asked more than 100,000 people to be praying for you. The last place I spoke in America at a conference, I asked all those students to be praying for you. And then this morning, I put out a post on our Facebook and Twitter that goes to more than 150,000 people. And I said, I'm speaking today in Singapore to about 7,000 people. Please pray for them. And I checked the post afterwards. We're praying for you in Argentina. We're offering Mass for you guys in Kenya, praying for you from the Philippines. All these prayers are descending upon you. And all I would ask in return is if you would please pray for all of the people that we speak to, for my wife who's expecting our baby in 7 weeks, and for the students who are about to come in tonight for the presentation after Mass. All of you are more than welcome to stay for that presentation, which is completely different than this one. But if after all the stuff I said to you today, maybe your heart is heavy, you got a lot of thinking you got to do about your life. All you need to know is one thing, if you've made some big mistakes, and it's how God looks at you for doing that stuff. And this is how he sees you. A dad a few years ago dropped off his son at preschool. He said, I love you. I'll pick you up after school. Promise, come get you. And the dad went to work. Huge earthquake struck Armenia. The dad shoots back to the school, but it's too late. The school's collapsed. The faculty was dead. And the dad shows up. He said, I know my son's in that school. Starts tearing off the rocks and the glass. He dug for an hour, 5 hours. His knuckles were bleeding open. His back was cramped up. He dug for 10 hours. Like you guys, Father's one day. He dig for your kid forever, 30 hours. He said, all I could think as I dug for my boy is the promise I always made to him. No matter what happens, you know I'm always going to be there for you. 38 hours later, he lifts off a board, and then under that's the face of his son. And he looked down upon his son, and his son looked up to him and said, Papa. And his son turned to 14 kids trapped alive with him, and he said, see, I told you my daddy was coming to get me. I told you he promised. This is the love of God the Father. It doesn't matter how far away you think he is, he's always there to welcome you home. You guys have been a wonderful audience. I love you guys. Have a beautiful life. Thank you guys very much.